Hi everyone, and welcome to a new season of It's Just Feminism, where we try to answer some simple yet complicated questions like what is feminism, who are feminists, what do feminists do, and can feminism actually change the world? Well, the guests of this series will show by example that not only does feminism have a potential to change the world, they're actively doing it. My name is Aurora, I'll be your host, and joining me today is Ellen, who is an amazing author in Canada, who just debuted their poem collection. So I'm very excited to talk more about the details behind the book, about the inspiration, about the life experiences they wrote, and then hopefully that will open up a very important topic regarding racial discrimination that people in Canada and the US specifically experience if they're coming from China. So I believe that now, more than ever, considering who won the elections, we need to talk about those issues. We need to confront the history, the cultural violence and discrimination that still exists today, but we need to make sure it stops, because future generations deserve more than believing that they don't belong just because they're coming from somewhere, or that they have to pay more just because they're coming from somewhere, and things like that. If you enjoy watching this, make sure to leave a like, maybe even subscribe so you miss any future episodes with other amazing guests just like Ellen. And thank you, Ellen, so much for being here today with me, or I guess maybe here with you in your home.
Thank you, Aurora, for having me, and hi to everyone at home. I'm so thrilled to be on this show. We are sitting in my living room / dining room area, so very cozy today.
As it should be, I believe. Even though we're talking about difficult topics, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't seek comfort. Especially because of those topics, we need to feel comfortable and ourselves. And sometimes the best place for that is your home. So thank you for welcoming me here. Like, I'm so honored. Thank you, Holly from River Street Writing, who made this happen. So for starters, can you please introduce yourself a little bit? Like, what do you stand for? What are some of your experiences in life that shaped you and that, after all, inspired this book?
My name is Ellen Chang Richardson. I am of Taiwanese and Chinese Cambodian descent, and I currently live on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe, which is colonially known as Ottawa, Ontario. It's a place that Aurora and I both share, so that's also another added little lovely note. In terms of how I come to writing and where I come from, I came to writing relatively later in life. I'm in my mid-30s, and I didn't come to actually writing until my late 20s. It just always felt like a way for me to be able to communicate what is hard to say openly. I grew up in Oakville, Ontario, originally, kind of. So I was born in Toronto. I grew up in Oakville, Ontario, which is a tiny little white suburban town. And then I moved to Shanghai when I was 10 and lived there for 8 years, and then moved back to Toronto, and now I'm here. Growing up in that small little white suburban town in the 1990s, in the 1990s, I was one of two racial, visibly non-white folk on my whole block, one of 3 in my entire school. And so I grew up just kind of developing a very thick skin, or trying to develop a very thick skin, and trying to rub the yellow out of my skin, and being told that my food was stinky when my mom would pack it to work, but now dumplings are being sold for $35 for a tiny little bowl. Yeah. So it's so hip. I come from a place where I'm trying to kind of reclaim my culture a little bit. But that's only one component of my writing. I'm also, I was, prior to writing and being in the literary community, in the literary world, I worked in the visual art world for a while. And when I was there, and I studied in the visual art world, and like everything, textbooks only highlight cis white males for the most part. I think things are hopefully slowly trying to change. But so I'm also interested in that, and a lot of my writing is informed by my love of contemporary art.
It even shows the structure of the book, and we'll get into some examples. It's beautiful.
Yeah, and also wanting to highlight other creatives who are kind of in the margins, so to speak, and who are doing incredible things. And so community contemporary art, climate crisis. Those are the things that drive me in my work.
It's amazing. You're also co-founder of Riverbed reading series.
Yes.
So can you tell us a bit more about it? Why did you found it? What is the purpose of it, and how can people find it?
Yeah, so Riverbed Reading Series is a interdisciplinary reading series based here in Ottawa, but we actually present all of our events hybrid. So they're simultaneously in person and streamed online. So as long as you have a solid internet connection, you can tune in to our events, and they're pay what you can with a suggested donation of $20 just to keep the series going. The impetus for starting it is me and my co-founder, Nina Jane Dristic, I moved to Ottawa in 2019. Enough time to make some friends and then get shut down for the pandemic. But during that time, I met a group of really lovely poets here in the city. And Nina was one of these poets, and just over falafel plates and over wine and over, lots of conversations and dinners and kind of social gatherings, we realized that we had a similar dream of starting an interdisciplinary reading series here in the city. I'm inspired by Cabaret Voltaire, which was organized and put on by the Dadaists, and they were rebelling against World War I and sort of the wild, capitalist uprising and just the world being on fire, which is now, as you mentioned, it's now cyclical. And Nina was heavily inspired by her work as a sound poet, but also by Café Le Hibou, which existed in Ottawa during the 70s and 80s. And it was this community gathering space for musicians, poets, playwrights, memoirists, and that sort of community space doesn't really exist where all of these different art forms can come together. So we wanted to create something like that. We call every event iterations because they kind of build on each other and inform one another, and we seek to create conversation and to bring people together. And the events are cabaret style, and they're hosted with our venue partner Club Saw, which is a fully accessible space.
Yes, sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. You should come.
I'm gonna have to. It's incredible. We need those third places where people of different backgrounds, different disciplines, different ideas, but we share the same drive to create and to indulge in arts in different forms. We need places where you can just do that.
Yeah,
so
in a
amazing.
safe space, right? Have those conversations with one another.
We need to support each other. Nobody else is gonna do it.
Yeah.
We do it ourselves.
And especially now, it's the only way forward.
Yeah. So what are some feminist practices in your everyday life that bring you that support, that help you work with other people, that help you express yourself?
So I don't know if I actively think about this. And so I was really thrilled with your question when it came in, because I was like, what are these practices? I've always been feminist ever since I was a kid. And I remember, I'm a child of divorce, kind of. It's a tricky, messy separation thing. But I always remember my mother, when I was very young, being like, you need to have your own money. You need to do your own thing. And if you happen to find somebody that can be your partner in life, then great. But you need to have your own stability. And that's kind of informed how I move throughout my life. Everything that I do is a conscious choice. I think when I was younger, in my 20s, I had a lot of therapy. Thank you, cognitive behavioral therapy. Thank you, medication. I was very anxious, and I still am a very anxious person, but I've learned to kind of work through that and work with that. And I found someone in my life who supports me as a human being. Everything that I now do is a conscious choice. I always aim to support the people around me. I truly believe that if you lift up others, then you yourself will also move forward. And I don't know. I think that's it. conscious little steps. Feminism does infuse my everyday, my personal life, as well as my work life, as well as my friends. I'm surrounded constantly by incredible minds and incredible people who believe in equality and equity, and that's really invigorating.
Yeah, we all need those people around us who help us feel that way and that we can support on their own journeys, because we all have that story of our own that needs to be told. And you started sharing your story, as you said, in your late 20s, which is, I think, a great point to highlight, because a lot of people sometimes think they're too late when they leave, I don't know, high school, and like, that's it. The hobbies that you had and the person that you were, like, that's it. Anything afterwards, you're late, you're too old, it doesn't make sense, you're not gonna make it. That's not true. Like, you are being proof that's not true. Like, this book is a testament to it. What would you advise to people who might feel that way, who didn't yet make that step to allow themselves to do it? And what are some ways that you nurture the life for writing and, you know, finding time in the day to actually do it with your work and everything else?
I would say for anyone who's feeling anxious, a little bit imposter syndrome-y, a little bit like it's too late, just trust in yourself and trust in the process. Everyone moves at their own pace in life, and just because someone else is doing something doesn't mean that you need to be defined by what that other person is doing. Kind of like, you know, focus on what next steps you want to do, but don't worry too much. Like, have a plan. You know, I always have a plan. I have like a low-key strategy in the back of my head, but I try not to worry about it too much, because things will come. And things get better in your 30s.
I still have a few more years to go, but I'm looking forward to it now, because everybody says that. Like,
so good. So I want to answer two parts of this nurturing thing. The one part about community and like youth and stuff. So I truly believe that part of what drives me to continue writing is to show younger generations that it is safe to be who you are, because representation matters so much. I remember this was like a couple Christmases ago, and I was spending it with my in-laws in St. Catharines, Ontario, which is like one of the whitest little suburban towns you can possibly find in southern Ontario. It's Caucasian there.
Hallmark.
Yeah, Hallmark. But I was sitting there, and you know, we were having a great time. I think we were relaxing right after either Christmas Eve dinner or just before, and the television was on, and we were watching our annual like football thing. But there was an ad that came on for Starbucks, and it was an Asian grandmother and her Asian daughter, like granddaughter, and they were just interacting with one another, and the freaking commercial was for a Starbucks hot chocolate. My heart expanded threefold, because I had never seen that. When I was growing up in the 90s, I never saw myself in anything. And you can even see it today when little black girls watch The New Little Mermaid. Just seeing yourself represented anywhere, somewhere, and like people happily supporting that and uplifting that, it means so much. So for, you know, emerging writers, I often try to mentor. Like Riverbed, we have a mentorship program. We've partnered with U Ottawa to mentor one curatorial mentee a year from the University of Ottawa's English department, just to like develop that, kind of like show them what it's like to run an interdisciplinary art series in the capital city, and like, if this is the path they want to take, these are things that they can do, and like introduce them to the community. And then with the League of Canadian Poets, which is an incredible organization here, they have a mentorship program called the PK Page Mentorship Program, and I took part in it last year. And they partner with Poetry and Voice, which is a high school poetry program, to allot a small number of spots in the PK Page mentorship program for high school students. And so this one specific high school student reached out and asked if I could mentor them, even though I hadn't yet released a book. And I was like, yeah, sure. And so we like worked together, and now they have a full chapbook that they're ready to submit, and fingers crossed that it gets picked up somewhere. You know, that's one part of what nourishes me as a writer is continuing to do it so that younger generations see themselves and also see potential to create something and be part of that conversation. Like, Eden Robinson has a fantastic quote that I keep on my fridge. If you don't see yourself in the literary landscape, then the landscape probably needs you more than ever. Whenever I feel doubts, I always think about that. Which leads into writing is very lonely and strenuous. staring into the abyss. Or flailing around with your face down on the ground. So I try to structure in time where I'm actually focused on writing. So every Sunday I set aside 11 till 1, and I only write during 11 to 1. A colleague of mine now joins me every other Sunday. And so having that sort of structure set in place is really helpful to kind of reorient and know that no matter how busy and how wild my life gets during a week, at least on Sundays from 11 to 1, I'm writing, and I'm only writing. And then if I have time elsewhere, like after work or in the middle of the night, I will write as well.
It's amazing. Like you give a promise to yourself that at least those 2 hours a week, the only thing that exists are your thoughts and that piece of paper or that blank page on the laptop. So that's amazing. And we need those study buddies, writing buddies, because sometimes like you get to writing and you see that blank page. It might even not be a blank page, but you just like you're blank inside. And you're like, well, I mean, I have that dishwasher that needs unloading. I can wash those laundry. Oh, my dog needs a walk. I have to leave. Like, oh my God.
What did I do? Yeah, for sure. You're so right. It's so easy to find those excuses to not do it. So yes, it is good to have a structure.
We can now move into the book itself. Into some questions about specific poems that appear through it.
This is the book.
What is the publisher? Where can people find it?
Belies was published by Woolsey & Wynne. They're based in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. They do ship internationally, so you can find this book wherever books are sold, although I always say boycott Amazon and support your local independent, because they are strongholds of local economy. Really, wherever books are sold, preferably indie bookshops and direct from the publisher. I do know, for those watchers in the US, I do know this is available at certain independent bookstores in the US. For a little bit, I think it was available at Barnes & Noble as well. I'm not quite sure what the supply chain is like at the moment, but I am sure that if you go into your favorite store, like your favorite indie bookshop, and talk to the owners, they can probably get it. My friend who lives in Ithaca, New York, got one. So.
And you can always request in your local library as well.
Yes.
And the more people request for it, the chances are better they might get 1, 2, 3 copies, and you also get paid for that. So
yes, especially in Canada. So if you can't afford a book for whatever reason, the library is a fantastic resource as well. And in Canada, there is a public lending rights program, which means that the more people borrow an author's book from the library, if the author is signed up, which I am, which every author should sign up for, but if the author is signed up, then they do get royalty cuts from every borrow, essentially. Thank you for bringing that up. I always forget.
No problem. I learned that from Holly, so thank you, Holly.
Thank you, Holly.
So let's get into the nits and grits of the book. English class style. First of all, I think a great segue into the topics that are like intertwined in the book is one specific picture or an edit of a picture, better say. So could you please let us know what is the symbolic behind it? Why did you, now that I know that you have background in visual arts, I get that part, but can you tell us a bit more details? Who are those people and what does that photo mean to you?
So this is the photograph, but it is an old school Chinese style family portrait, multi-generational family portrait that has been grayscaled and blurred. So the image has been layered up on top of each other and kind of like pitch shifted, for lack of a better word. It is a snapshot of my father's side of the family. And my father is a survivor of the Cambodian genocide. So if he and my grandmother, my aunt and my uncle and my grandfather had never fled the Cambodian genocide, I wouldn't be here. And so a lot of this book, it investigates the history of institutional racism in North America and braids it with fractured memory and familial history. A little bit from my mother's side, but particularly on my father's side. And the title is Blood Belies, which belies is a relatively more obscure word, but it means to deceive. When I was searching for a title for the book, I wanted to touch on how there's such a emphasis on how purity of blood is important in cultures and society, and at the end of the day, it's not. We're all the same.
Yeah.
We all bleed the same color, albeit maybe a different hue, like slightly different tones, but we all bleed, we all hurt, we all laugh, cry, use bodily functions. It's all the same. That's that, and that is the photograph.
It's a beautiful photograph. It makes you stop. Like you're reading through the book and you get to that photo and then you look at it and it's like, I don't know, it captures something, that legacy of being alive now. I don't know how to say it, but like realizing that you are the product of thousands and thousands and thousands of years of generations who loved each other,
Maybe hated each
more,
other,
maybe
yeah.
not, depending. But like we can have that romantic idea with that all of them brought us here where we are now, and it's on us to like, make sure that everything is fine now. What's important is that some people believe that we can't betray the past by moving to some modern values. So they use it to excuse bigotry and discrimination and racism and stuff like that, and it shouldn't be on that. We shouldn't focus on keeping the traditions in that way so that we can honor our heritage. We should learn to honor it by making peace and making sure that genocide, displacements, discriminations, violence, either institutional or social, like in the streets, in everyday life, that it doesn't happen. Like that's the legacy that we should continue for the future generations.
I wish more people thought like that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I think the world wouldn't look the same as it does now.
It would hopefully be a much better place. But
Yes. How do we recover that feeling of belonging, of searching for that place to belong and finding words to express that belonging?
I think it's about finding your people, and then, like we were talking about before, holding them safe and also supporting them and supporting each other. And then also beyond that, like actively being vocal about calling out racism when you see it, calling out sexism misogyny when you see it, calling out genocide when you see it, and doing tiny little things to show your solidarity and support.
One of the topics that is mentioned in the book is your experience of being bullied in school because of the racial and gender combinations, which are always so fun. What would you advise to kids now who are experiencing that? And who, not only the kids who are experiencing being bullied, but the kids who are doing the bullying. Like, if you could talk to both sides and let them know something, what would that be?
I'm not the best with children. And it's difficult, right? Because children are sponges, and I feel like, especially with bullies, there's something going on in their home that is not safe. And so when they reach, when they enter into the school yard, for lack of a better, visual, but when they're in that different environment, there's a lashing out and it's a transference. I'm not very good with children.
It's okay.
Sorry. I would probably be like, honey, what's going on? You want to talk about it? Like, what's happening here? But then on the flip side, I am not their parent. I don't know if I have the right to like talk down a child. To those who are being bullied, I was one of those, and it does get better. It sucks when you are being bullied, and it feels like it's the end of the world, but yeah, it does get better. It does. The end of the school year is not ever that far away. And sometimes you have to stand up for yourself and fight back a little bit. I remember a story. I was in grade 5 or 6, and I was being bullied horrendously by this guy who I couldn't tell if he was bullying me because he liked me or if he was bullying me because he was like, there was something going on at home. But I reached a point where I had had enough and I grabbed him by the throat. And I was like a tiny little, like, I'm still quite small, but I'm also a Gemini. So you hit my limit and I will. So I kind of grabbed him by the throat and threw him against a locker. And we both got hauled into the principal's office. And I just sat there stone-faced, like I didn't apologize. Because teachers aren't dumb. They know what's going on. And even if they choose to ignore it. And so I think I remember both our sets of parents were hauled in. I have no idea what was said because I was ignoring everything, very stone-faced. And then like a week later, he transferred out of the school. And no one bullied me for the rest of the year. So I don't condone violence, but sometimes you need to stand up for yourself.
Yeah, there is a big difference. And I mean, we see it now with genocide that are happening right now, that some people are denied the right to defend themselves. Yeah, like the US has that whole thing about whatever amendment it is to carry the weapons in the Walmart, because you have to right to defend yourself. And then the people whose literal land and homes are getting invaded and destroyed, they don't have that right because they're going to be called monsters or savages or terrorists or whatever.
It's active colonial genocide that we're witnessing in Gaza right now. It's colonial expansion moving into Lebanon. And it's horrifying and outrageous.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment as we're filming this, the arrest warrants have been made for the leaders of the genocide by the International Court of Justice, so let's hope that in one of the 124 countries that are, signed into that, I hope that he might then get sent away and justice will be served, but more importantly that it will stop, because what bugs me the most is that we have such types of violence, genocide, discriminatory acts and stuff like that, and we let it go on for so long, and people get hurt, and those people are staying hurt for their whole lives, but then we seek justice afterwards, like, yeah, we're gonna put them in jails or whatever, we're gonna call them war criminals or whatever, like the history will remember them as bad guys. Okay, but that doesn't change the fact that people have died, that people have been displaced or traumatized forever, or that family, one of the topics that you mentioned in the book is families like being split apart because of the discriminatory policies and stuff like that. So we need to prevent that from happening, not just seek justice once it happens. Yeah. And we see that now in the US with the Trump winning and saying that he will get rid of all the illegal immigrants, which is something that they did 100 years ago with Mexican citizens. And I say citizens because the people they deported were legal citizens. They had their rights, but people who came only saw the tone of their skin and said, no, leave. And we have the same thing in Canada.
Which is like irony of ironies, because all freaking both our governments are settler colonialist governments that are existing on land that is still unceded and will never be given back. And so that's, it's the writers, at least for me, I do what I can to shine spotlights and to make sure that these obscured, like that these receipts are not forgotten. Yeah.
Yeah, we have the receipts on, unfortunately, the Chinese Exclusionary Act and the head tax that the Chinese immigrants were exposed to 100 years ago. Last year was 100 years since the act passed. Yes. And I've dug some stats about it all. So first of all, we had the head tax thing. Chinese immigrants had to pay $50 in the beginning of the 20th century to get to Canada. Then, a few years later, it turned to $100. Then a few years later, it turned into $500, all until 1923 when the Chinese Exclusionary Act was passed. and then it became a whole different type of shit.
Mhm.
And it stank a bit differently. But
Yeah.
I tried to convert that money, those $500 100 years ago, into today's money, corrected for inflation, and it turns into $9,229. You're entering the country, and just because you're coming from a specific country, you have to pay.
For a while, it wasn't just specifically from China or Taiwan or Hong Kong or Macau. It was also if you looked Chinese. So even immigrants into Canada, Chinese people with British nationality were also excluded. It was the only, the Chinese Canadians are the only race. And we were also lumped in with Japanese Canadians, and Japanese Canadians faced a whole world of other shit. A whole different pile of smelly crap because of World War II. And I didn't focus on that as much because that's not my story to tell, but it's very interlinked. I raised my eyebrow at the image of Canada as such a great country, the image of America as this like beautiful country of freedom.
Free.
Like I just, you're yeah, sure, land of the free on stolen land. I don't know how to break this to you.
What type of consequences do we see today in Canada or in the US when it comes to like the heritage of that type of discrimination from 100 years ago? Like you mentioned in the book, COVID, which was a very horrific time. I think you mentioned like 700% increase of racially motivated violence.
It's a very layered question that has a not very easy answer. I think in short, there's a lot of unspoken intergenerational trauma that people just carry with them. Like you look at Indigenous communities right now and the legacy of residential schools and the 60s scoop, the foster care system, healthcare system. The racism is so ingrained, deeply ingrained in every single system that it makes it difficult for Indigenous folks to move past what they were given, like the lot they were given, right? And so I feel like that's also the same it's to a slightly less, it's complicated with Chinese folks because we fit another toxic category, which is the model minority, which I, as an adult, try to rail against because, we really achieved assimilation because it was the only way to survive. And so, yeah, we did it a bit too well. And then the colonial structure started labeling us as model minorities, minorities that other minorities should aspire to be. Like, that's bullshit. But that's kind of our weird little twisted legacy. And so a lot of therapy is the trickle down effect. I did a lot of therapy. I think the only way forward is radical hope and open conversation and support and, until capitalism gets torn down and burnt out. In Ottawa, actually, for instance, we have an incredible Indigenous cafe over in Lansdowne. It's called Bindigan. And they're a community space and a great cafe. And so, supporting that, there's a trading post in the Byward Market that is Indigenous owned, and all of the proceeds go back. They highlight Indigenous creators and business owners, and all that. They have a space for youth, and all the proceeds go back into the community. So it's seeking those things out. I know it's holidays right now as we're filming this, so I'm thinking about how do I want to buy? Who do I want to buy for? And it's actively putting your money where your ethics are.
You mentioned the assimilation and that your family, the Chinese people in general did too well with all and then we have the results of it with, you have to be the straight A student, you have to be the very on-time clean worker, you have to be all the things, but who you actually are. So in the book you also mentioned how your father is the ultimate example of embracing that acclimation and doing all that he has to do for, as you said, survival, to be accepted. But what is the cause of that acclimation? Like, what are some things that fragmented then the history of your family or the practices that you do because you had to assimilate and belong and make sure you're not bullied for the smelly lunch and all of that?
And you just lose bits and pieces of your culture. And you lose bits and pieces of your connections to your ancestors because you try so hard to forget them. And as I become older, I'm trying to reconnect more, to understand both sides a little bit more. It's more difficult with my father's side because he and I don't have the best relationship. And no one likes to talk about the genocide. No one likes to talk about what happened. The Cambodian genocide was a genocide that was founded on lies. Like Pol Pot's party came into power, and they came into power based on lies. And then he just killed anyone who dissented. He killed people with glasses. He killed anybody who, he started killing his own people because he got so paranoid. And so it was just this web of lies and murder and fear. And no one likes to talk about it, which is fair. So it's very difficult. There are people in this photo that I don't even know who they are. So I don't think I'll ever gain those threads back, but that's okay too. To a certain degree, that's okay too.
Yeah. There is some grieving,
yeah,
in that process. But yeah, I mean, it's normal that you lose a lot of that everyday history and stuff, especially because a lot of cultures did not have literacy and other mechanisms of collecting history. So,
or recording it. But then also in war, like what happened with there's a great artist who's based in Singapore. Her name is Shubiki Rao. And she's working on a long form project called Pulp, where she looks at the legacy of written text and repositories and how these kind of threads move between generations and people with movement and diaspora. Our third part of this long form project, Pulp 3, I think, 4? I can't remember right off the top of my head which one it was, but it was in the Venice Biennale 2 years ago. And I went and I saw it, and she was in that specific iteration of this long form project. She was looking at the destruction of libraries and cultural knowledge spaces, specifically in war. And she looked at Bosnia and Herzegovina as an example of that, where the first thing invading parties do is destroy cultural heritage and destroy repositories of knowledge, because
which is a war crime.
They want to rewrite what exists.
Yeah, and then we have situations like people saying, but queer people didn't exist 100 years ago and stuff like that. They did, but Hitler destroyed all the archives on it. Like there was literally a huge library or an archive specifically for transgender studies in the early 20th century in Germany. But then when Hitler came to power, he was like, well, this does not work with all of the white supremacy, patriarchal, capitalist, whatever it was. So he burned down the archive, and all the knowledge, all the histories, all the stories of people and their struggles and their resistance and hope that they had and love they shared was gone.
Yeah.
And now we don't have that anymore. So people who are in power now can say, well, it didn't exist 100 years ago, because there is nothing to prove that it did.
Which is why artists and writers are so important, because we actually go, well, you know what, I don't think that's true.
And also, like every piece of art that is produced is a snapshot in time. So it serves as an archive in itself. So even though if you did a conscious choice to write those stories in your book, but even if you didn't do it and it just was there because it was yours and it's part of you, it would still count, it would still matter. And that's why it's important to do anything, literally anything to to capture our thoughts and feelings and hopes and plans for the future or whatever, because that's the only thing that we have to look back on and then see where we were and where we can go.
Yeah.
Both as ourselves and as a society. So the fundings for art departments are getting lesser and lesser every year, and especially now in the US, people are guessing that a lot of funding will get cut because of some other bigger priorities.
It's happening here in Canada too. We have to be careful. We have our own little version of Trump.
Yeah.
But he's smarter. So watch out, Canada.
Yeah, it's like a disease that spreads.
Yeah.
I mean, fascism is a disease.
That's a disease, yeah.
That kills societies, so that's a problem. You can get into specific poems. There are a few that caught my eye, I guess, throughout all the readings. So we could talk about those. We could talk about the ones that you wish to especially highlight, in hopes that one day, when some future generations will have this book in their assignment for English class,
Oh, I hope so.
they will read it and they will know exactly what the author wanted to say when they used the color blue, because you are the author and you're going to tell them why they used the color blue.
So before we go into the poems, I feel like I should read a couple, okay? What I might do though is 10-second pause, because I'm gonna go get a bit of sound equipment. Well, I wanted to capture the bodily experience of living with all these. So there is a poem in the middle of the collection called "Resonate This." It's not the genocide poem, but it's an immigration poem. It began as an intervention of Canada's 1902 sessional paper, number 54, which is the report of the Royal Commission on Chinese and Japanese Immigration. Which, I mean, when individuals talk about like a central poem to their collection, this would be that center poem to mine. So the interventions soon expanded from this starting point to a series of interventions of like Canadian encyclopedia stories and childhood songs, personal experiences, that sort of thing, and also 2020 newspaper articles. So my one rule was to keep italicized lines true to their source in this specific poem. So this is "Resonate This." We are built, heritage languished, whiplash. Chinese laborers work under appalling conditions to build the Canadian Pacific Railway. Chinese migrants required to pay a $50 head fee, the only ethnic group to pay a tax to enter Canada. Head tax. Head tax. Head tax. Head tax. Head tax is $100. Unfit for full citizenship. Head tax is $500. Head tax. Dangerous. Head tax to the state. Head tax. Head tax. Iron hearts guard cold doors closed, but red on white, we are not your enemy. Head tax. Chinese immigration suspended until further notice. Ethnic Chinese with British nationality also restricted. Head tax. 11 points mark an entry. Head tax. Chinese Canadians gain the vote. Head tax. Prince. Head tax. Prince. Head tax. Prince. Immigrants leave sweatprints. Head tax. On blank booklets of navy and gold. Prince. Head tax. Prince. Chinese, Japanese, dirty knee, Chinese, Japanese, dirty knee, Chinese, Japanese, dirty knee. Red Rover, send Ellen right over. Chinese, Japanese, dirty knee, Chinese, Japanese, dirty knee. Beneath shades, beneath shades, beneath shades, Chinese children, Chinese children, Chinese children, beneath half Chinese children play. Red Rover, sent right over. Chinese, Japanese, dirty knees, honk honk. Look at these. Honk. Dumplings, noodles, dim sum, even we enter the mainstream. Shame shifts to pride, muted by irony. Get the fuck out of here. Go back to where you came from. Hey, rice cake. Hey, you. Hey, babe. Well, fuck you then, chink. Where can I get some dumplings? Snow falls on dark heads, defiant. What? It's not racist at all.
Yeah. It was beautiful, first of all. The audio experience was incredible. I hope that it captured, like, the audience will be able to experience it in a different way, because I had goosebumps. This is the one of those that was the hardest to read.
Yes, it was. And actually, so I read this piece at the Writers' Fest in Ottawa back in October, and I actually had to practice it during sound check twice, and it was still so difficult to read. And I've read this so many times, and it's still super difficult to read, but I think it's important, so it needs to be read. There's another one that Aurora highlighted that is a lot of fun, and it's very beautiful, and it's a bit more quiet and meditative, but it is a longer form piece. So I'm going to read, and there's like two different versions of it. So there's Storm Surge, which is the first instance, and then later in the back of the book there is Tundra Mist, and it's kind of a continuation of the same story, but with that fractured memory component. So I'll read a little bit of this one, just because we're talking about genocide and we're talking about intergenerational trauma and how that affects, and development, thought, body. But I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's quite long. It's like 20 minutes if I read it. And it comes sort of right after the image. Once the closest of confidants, now shored up on opposite sides of the globe. Existing as practically strangers. I lost my wanderlust in tandem to losing you, but we no longer speak of such things. Summer heat, 4 degrees above history, calls to me like the sweat at my brow beckons to another time when you and I would pick daisies in the meadows of our backyard. Ba would only share his darkest stories in the middle of a summer storm. How he snuck under the wooden floorboards of a docked Mekong freighter. 2 weeks after freeing from his shackles. 3 weeks after fleeing into the jungle. 4 weeks after losing father, brother, sister, stepmother. Unprecedented separation. They had me chained by my ankle like a, how do you say it again, Bobby? A go. A dog? Papa? That's it. It was in a tiny shack on the edge of a newly cut clearing. I can still hear the mosquitoes. I can still hear the mosquitoes in my deepest anxieties, hear their high-pitched hum. I can feel the oppressive heat. I can smell it that combination of human feces and fear pungent, my small nose wrinkles. I crawl into my fort-like cabinet, run my hands over solid wood, feel the pulse of my father's secrets in my veins. Enclosed, safe, claustrophobic, free. I bribed the boatman to keep me secret, to smuggle me into Laos. In Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl traces history, himself, others, genocide, war, through scraps of hidden paper. Step 1, mentally strike out whole former life. Mind detaches, a means of protection. Rearrange yourself, grateful for the smallest of mercies. Step 2, apathy, slowly pitching, an intense longing for home and family. Emotional death compounded, raw abhorrence, foulness envelops, surrounds, drowns. The corpses near me, crawling with lice, did not bother me. Step 3, after liberation, phase in and out of yourself. Attempt to acclimatize, tender beginnings, into society you no longer recognize, that no longer recognizes you. And then it goes on from there.
Thank you so much for reading it.
Thank you.
I think that the power of your writing is in capturing not only the unique experiences of your own family, but when it comes to the topic of genocide and discrimination, you manage to capture the universal experience of being the other, the subaltern, of experiencing being thrown out of your own home, of your own land, and making to find ways to survive in whatever means necessary. So I hope that people will turn to this poem, use it as a way to digest what's happening right now, to see where we are in that process, what's yet to come, so that we can prepare, so that we can help each other to survive, and then to heal afterwards. Because we have to, there is no, there is unfortunately no other alternative. The alternative is to just give up.
Yeah.
And it's not an option.
Exactly.
We don't want that. And these stories are, no matter how painful they are, they still prove hope. Because even all of that happened, you're still here, and you're writing about it, and you're making sure that it's not forgotten. And even though that's like a small piece of resistance, it's a huge slap in the face to those who try to erase you. So it's beautiful, and thank you for allowing us like to dwell in that world of yours.
Thank you for inviting me in.
It's hard to
I know.
continue from this. We are nearing the end of the episode. I just have a few more questions left for you. We have this segment, Feminist Recommends. So what are you currently reading, watching, listening to, or doing that brings you joy, that inspires you, fills your energy, or just lets you wander and be free and do whatever you need to do?
I've been playing a lot of Spiritfarer. I play Spiritfarer. I like cozy games like Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley, but I've been playing a lot of Spiritfarer because for anyone who's unfamiliar with the game, it's by an indie game company, and you are the Spiritfarer. You take over from Charon and use fairy spirits and fulfill their last sort of tasks and desires, and before you bring them to the moon gate that then sends them into the beyond. And it looks at grief, and it looks at dealing with death. I lost a dear friend of mine early this year to a very violent way of losing someone, and it's helped with kind of working through grief. So that's been bringing me lots of joy. After we wrap up, I'm going to be putting it on the television and playing some spirits. Yeah. Outside of that, I haven't been reading anything at the moment because I just got back from a reading, and I'm reading again in Ottawa at Perfect Books this coming Sunday. But I did pick up Convenience Store Women, which is it's like a fiction book. Hold on. Let me get it. I'm part of an Asian book club here in Ottawa. And like I joined it as a way to connect with other East Asian folks because I don't have much East Asian community here. And so I've never actually succeeded in reading a full book and like going to a book club meeting. I've just been doing all the side quests. Like we do like the main book club, and then we do side quests. Like we go and watch movies at the Bytown together, or like we'll go and watch plays together. Like the last side quest that we did was to go to the NAC and watch a ghost story play, which was really amazing. It was called Snow in Midsummer, and I think it's done its run now, but if it ever comes back, you need to watch it. And if it's ever in your city, you need to watch it. It's a collaboration with the Shakespeare Company and East Asian playwrights. It's part of a larger project where they're bringing plays from the Yuan dynasty into the contemporary English stage. And the Yuan dynasty is when Shakespeare was writing. And so it's, anyway, long story short, so that's the segue aside. This is the next assignment, and I finally picked it up, and I'm going to read it and hopefully, attend the book club meeting. It's Convenience Store Woman, and it's by Sayaka Murata. And it was named a best book of the year in the US, I think last year. So I haven't started it yet, but I plan to.
Yeah, there is that whole toxicity in the literary circles on social media, like the book talk and Bookstagram and all of that. We don't need to read a specific number of books a week, a year, or whatever to consider ourselves a reader.
No, we do
just
not.
Pick up a book when you want to, and you feel like it, read a few pages as long as you want to do it, and then leave it.
Yeah.
And nothing bad happens. But people are so like stuck in that I don't know if it's coming from school or from like some other competitive field or whatever, but you don't have to keep a journal of the things I read and things I will have to read and the number of pages per day and how much that is in a year and 10 years. Like, yeah, it's a great thing to look back on and see like, wow, I have read so many things and enjoyed a few of those. But like, we don't need to put that pressure on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Like, reading should be
enjoyable.
Yeah,
I have so many books that I've never read. I have an ever-growing to-be-read pile.
Same.
But that's fine. Although on the flip side, if like keeping a catalog list works for you, hey, you do.
Yeah, I mean, of course. But I'm just coming to the perspective of like, don't put the pressure on yourself and make it harder or stressful, because reading is one of those things that you're doing it by yourself. Like, there is nobody else. Okay, yeah, if you're doing the book club, but still, the process of reading itself is very intimate and very your own. So why bring somebody else in it?
That's true. So yes, 2016, 2018. I'm very excited to dive in. Don't know what it'll be like, but I've heard good things, and it was a national bestseller. So.
Thank you so much for your feminist recommendations. And of course, the Belies. The more I know. When Dyslexic thought it was Belies.
That's an entirely different visual.
We are nearing the end of the episode, so the only last question left is if you have any messages to the audience, if you want to repeat something or call people for specific action, now is the moment for it.
It's going to be very scary coming up in the next few years. It already is very scary, but I think it's going to become a little bit more scary closer to home. And it's, I want to say, hold on to hope and keep fighting.
Yeah. And keep on hoping and dreaming of that better future, because we all deserve that. We don't have to stay in capitalist, patriarchal, colonial system. It's not our own choice, but it's somebody's choice.
Yeah.
And we could influence that choice by voting, by protesting, by being the difference that we want to be. And thank you for being the difference, for sharing those hidden stories, for breaking the silence, for making sure that even in like the world of poetry or whatever else, that you're carving space, that you're carving space for the story of your family and for the stories of Chinese immigrants who were so, I don't even know what word to use, like, but they didn't deserve to be treated as dogs, as you said, because even dogs deserve more compassion, empathy, and everything else.
Love.
Yes, so this is a beautiful piece of work, and I hope that it will be found in bookstores and libraries in Canada, in US, and everywhere else, because we need to get out of that like regional, I don't know how to call it, but like yes, we're only here, and then we have artists there, and we have artists here. No, we're all people.
Yeah.
We all experience specific
And
things.
I love that you bring that up, because I am only one voice. So there are so many other voices that are telling similar stories, and our voices collectively tell an even stronger one. So support your community.
That's perfect. Thank you so much for this episode. Thank you for letting me into your home and for reading us your poems in such a powerful way. I really hope that people enjoyed the episode in its own, and specifically the readings, because it's always, I mean, it's a privilege. Like, in one moment I was like, oh, I'm literally here, I'm sitting next to you, and you're reading it to me. Like, it was an outer body experience, because I reread it so many times, like in my own voice, but hearing it in your actual voice as a person who wrote it is unbelievable privilege. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.
And thank you all for sticking around. Hope that you enjoyed it. And we'll also post some snippets of it on social media, so that you can check that out. And you have the transcript as well, if you just want to read through what we talked about. And yeah, thank you for being a part of this ever-growing community. And I hope that I'll see you in some other episode. Bye!